All right, great to have you. Thanks so much for coming and sharing your evening in this way. We're talking tonight about peace and um, how to find it in difficult, challenging, and anxious times. So I don't have to tell anybody here that we're in some difficult and challenging and anxious times. COVID is in full swing, and just a couple of days ago, we had storms move through and lightning strikes, and now California is full of smoke. Southern California, Northern California, lots of fires. And for some of you who are listening to this, you were a part of the campfire in Paradise a year and a half ago. And so the color of the sky, the smoke in the air, the threat of evacuations, it's all triggering some deep anxiety for you. And so these are challenging and anxious times. It's important to remember that no matter how anxious the times are externally, it is possible for us to find peace internally. So that's our topic tonight, and I'm hoping that through whatever discussion we might have, and especially through our meditation practices, that you'll tap into a deep place of peace that's always in you. This is the peace that in the Bible, Paul called the peace that passes understanding. It passes understanding because it is not related to the external world. It's not a state of mind that comes and goes based on our preferences or based on what's happening in the outer world. It's a state of being, which is to say, it's a part of the very fabric of our true nature, of our true being, peace. And so to learn to find that is one of the invitations of difficult times such as this. One of the great gifts will be you're looking back on this time and seeing how COVID and everything that was so challenging during this time was a great opportunity for you to learn to contact deep states of mind, deep states, I should say, of being, states of consciousness that are profoundly life-changing and life-enhancing. And so peace is one of those that we're going to be working with tonight. So I'd like to offer this idea for your consideration, that there is an outer life and that there is an inner life. Now, in the end, all distinctions and dualities are transcended. But in our process of moving toward that realization, it's helpful to see that there is an inner life that we're working with, living in, but there's also an inner life, an outer life, I should say, and an inner life. So the outer life is made up of physical matter, form, and phenomena. And that includes your physical body, your emotional body, and your mental body. This is part of the outer life structure. This is the personality self that interacts with the external world. That outer life is in the physical dimension. The inner life is the spiritual dimension, right? And again, when I say spiritual, I know that you understand, I'm not talking about religious. We're talking about the realm of spirit when we say spiritual. So the inner life is the realm of spirit. It's what Christ called the kingdom of heaven within. So don't mistake inner life as being small and outer life as being the container. That's not at all how it works here. The inner life is eternal and infinite. It is a part of infinite supreme consciousness. The outer life is the instrument that that consciousness occupies and operates through. Now, the challenge is that most human beings completely identify with their outer life and are completely unaware of their inner life. And that always results in the anxiety that we feel. The main anxiety that we feel is not due to what's happening in the outer life. The main anxiety that we feel is due to our our outer self not being in contact with the inner life, our outer self not being in contact with the soul, let's call it. The inner life is the domain of the soul. The outer life is the domain of the ego, until through life experience and through growth and development and practice and divine grace, we begin to discover that there is a oneness, that the outer life is meant to be an expression of the inner life, and a connection and alignment is made. And more the soul is able to operate unimpeded by the ego through the personality self in the world to accomplish its purpose. So this finding peace has to do with looking in and discovering the inner life, looking within and discovering that inner life, that kingdom of heaven within, that Buddha nature, that soul, that Christ consciousness. All these are different words for the same thing. So I'd like to move you through an exercise tonight of discovering this. For those of you that have been hanging out with me for a long time, this isn't going to be new. We're looking at it from different angles. We use different language and different angles because that's what it requires for us to discover this mystery. We'll never be able to quantify it, to figure it out, to catalog it and categorize it. That'll never happen. It'll always be a mystery, but it can be a mystery that we learn to live in and from. And as we do that, anxieties drop away. So I'd like to share with you a quote. Many of you know that it's my favorite Adyashanti quote. Adyashanti is a wonderful awake teacher. I encourage you to look him up if you don't know Adyashanti. Google him. He's got wonderful books. He's got a wonderful website. He's got free telecasts, from videocasts from time to time. So Adyashanti, I'd like you to listen to this quote. I'm going to share my screen here so that you can see it. So it goes like this: the enlightened sage abides as the eternal witness, wholly unconcerned, yet intimately engaged, resting beyond all definitions, neither clinging to transcendent freedom nor entangled by the dualistic world, therefore one with all of life. Again, the enlightened sage, this is where our evolution is moving us. The enlightened sage abides as the eternal witness. We're going to discover that in a few minutes, the eternal witness. And I love this combination: wholly unconcerned, there's no anxiety, and yet intimately engaged. This shows that the enlightened sage doesn't remove himself or herself from the world. The enlightened sage is in the middle of society, is working for the well-being of the world. It's intimately engaged. He or she is intimately engaged, and yet wholly unconcerned. That's the perfect peace we're looking to connect with. Resting beyond all definitions, which is what I said a moment ago. It remains a mystery throughout. It's nothing that the mind will be able to quantify and catalog and figure out, and therefore control. Neither clinging to transcendent freedom, which is the experience of the enlightened sage, nor entangled by the dualistic world, which is what we, the rest of us, experience until we reach that enlightened stage. And because of that, because there's neither a clinging to transcendent freedom, a striving after that freedom, nor getting lost in our life experience, because of that, there's a sense of oneness with all of life. All right, wow, that's a beautiful quote. So let's go to meditation now and see if we can begin to experience glimpses of this, yeah? So find an upright posture. Now, again, some of you are, kind of kicking back and relaxing. I don't mean to uh, get you into an uncomfortable position. It's helpful because as energy moves through the central channel, it's helpful to have a straight up and down spine. But combine that with a posture that you can hold for a while. We'll meditate for 40 minutes here. Let the breath become longer and slower and fuller. Regulate how much breath you take in so that breath becomes longer, and how much breath you let out so that the exhalation becomes longer and slower and deeper. Letting the belly be soft and open. Breathing into the belly, letting it rise up into the ribs and all the way up into the clavicles. And just the reverse with our exhalation. Just using this breath pattern to bring us into a greater sense of centeredness, quietness, a greater awareness of our experience. Now, let's do some very basic practices here. I'd like you to focus on your right foot. Just really focus on the sensations in your right foot. Now switch over to the left. Leave the right foot and switch over and shine the light of your awareness on the left foot and just feel the sensations there. Now you're focusing on the left foot, but be curious about who the you is that is focusing on the left foot. What is it that's aware of the sensations in the left foot? Bring your attention up into your right hand. And if your hands are together, that's even better. Distinguish between the right hand and the left hand, the sensations in the right hand and the sensations in the left hand. So this is just a very simple practice of mindfulness, of observing. But I want you to be equally as interested in what's watching the sensations as you are the sensations themselves. And can you sense that the awareness that's watching the hands is already in perfect peace? Now, most people on the planet have no awareness of their awareness. But as we grow in our awareness of being aware, as we begin to notice the noticer, watch the watcher, we begin to notice that that awareness is always in perfect peace. Awareness, as we're talking about it, is not a function of the mind. It is a function of the soul. It comes from the inner life. It is the way the inner consciousness watches the outer experience. Now, focus your attention on your breath, and especially down at the belly, just the movement in the belly as the breath just goes through its natural rhythm. No need to change its rhythm. Just watch the in and out of the breath. And notice that the observer watching the breath is absolutely in perfect peace. Now, someone who's new to this may say, well, this is just the mind feeling peaceful because it's not watching anything upsetting, feeling peaceful because it's watching breath. It's more than that. Because we can even use this, we can even notice that the awareness is perfect, is in perfect peace when it's watching the mind being upset or when it's watching the emotions being in turmoil. It's a little more challenging to start with that. So see if you can watch the body now as a whole rather than individual parts. Observe the experience of being in your body as a whole. And again, be aware of the part of you that is witnessing the body as a whole. And that witness is in perfect peace. Now, let's go to the next stage, which is a little bit more challenging. I'd like you to notice, identify, find in yourself, if it's there, any emotions that you have been perhaps struggling with today or this week. Especially if you can find it, bring your awareness to anxiety. Notice how I'm talking to about this. Bring your awareness to the pattern of anxiety, to the emotional pattern. I'm talking about it like this because anxiety is not what you are. It's not inherent to your being. It certainly is a central part of the human experience, a very familiar experience of the outer self, the personality self, yes. But it's not what you are. So find some anxiety, perhaps by thinking about something that happened today or something you saw on the news or some story in the mind that when you think it always kicks up some anxiety. And just be very curious about this energy. Watch it with the same kind of objectivity, if we can use that word, that you were watching your breath or your hands or your feet. Watch it as a pattern, as a thing, as an object to be aware of. And notice that the observer that's witnessing and watching anxiety is not itself anxious. Very important. Notice that the observer who's watching anxiety is not itself anxious. The observer is in perfect peace, even as it watches the energy of anxiety. The inner life, the kingdom of heaven within, is always in perfect peace, even as it observes the unfolding drama of the outer life. And one last thing, which is also kind of challenging, is observe the nature of thought, mental activity. Maybe your mind is debating with me about this process. Maybe your mind is busy trying to figure it out. Maybe your mind has wandered off to talk about your Costco list. Whatever the mind is doing, whatever activity is going on in the mind, awareness is observing it. Hmm. And the observer who's watching is in perfect peace. And for some, this, as they start off with this, is a little challenging because we are so used to being caught up and lost in our drama, completely identified with the outer self, not aware of the inner life whatsoever. This is just the case for most humans. It's not bad, it's not wrong. This is just an evolutionary process. And as we continue to grow and evolve, awareness begins to come online and we begin to be aware of being aware. And we're able to step back behind, so to speak, our experience and be the observer of our experience. And therefore be able to work skillfully, lovingly, intentionally with our experience. Drop your attention into the heart center and let's go within. We'll enter the inner life through the portal of the heart center. Now, again, we're using language that helps the mind to let go of its conditioning and open to a deeper or higher experience. So we're using poetic language here. Go deeper into the heart center. The deeper you go into the heart center, the deeper you go into your inner life. And you'll begin to experience it as spaciousness opening up, as a deeper stillness. We're allowing awareness to pull back into itself. And the familiar structures of the outer world form and structure falls away. And there is a growing sense of spaciousness and stillness and well-being and tranquility. As you allow yourself to fall back into the inner life. Another way to say it is to fall back into soul consciousness. Which knows no separation. And when you're in soul consciousness or you're in the inner life, there's no sense of boundary. And no certain thing to use to identify yourself. You are pure awareness. And there is no boundary here. And absolutely no fear here. And no sense of inadequacy here. And no sense of separation here. Or competition. Or judgment. Just a deep and profound and pervasive sense of peace and well-being. Now you may notice that mind may try to pull you back to the familiar, back to a sense of the outer self and the outer world, back to a familiar storyline and emotional pattern. And when this happens, just acknowledge it and let yourself drop back again into the inner life. Let awareness pull back into itself and abide in its own peace. Open to explore more deeply with the profound and pervasive peace of your soul. If the mind gets active or emotion is present, watch it with awareness. Be aware that the observer is in perfect peace. And then move more deeply back into that peace. To a feeling of greater openness, the expansion of consciousness out in all directions. The dissolving away, a temporary dissolving away of the outer self. Experiencing yourself to be pure, awake awareness, abiding in your light and love and tranquility. Whatever happens to disrupt your connection to peace, just be the observer of that. Don't make it bad. Don't try to fight it. Don't try to get rid of it. Just be the observer of that. And then notice that the observer of that is in perfect peace. And track back more deeply into that peace. And rest in it. Rest as it. And now bring this peaceful awareness back to the personality. Bring it back to the thinking mind, back to the emotions, back to physical sensation. Just as the peaceful observer, watching this outer self that most of us have spent our entire life completely identified with. Watching it with great compassion and kindness, no matter what you see. And especially watching the parts of the body mind that are not yet connected to or informed by the soul, that have no sense of connection to the inner life. That's what anxiety is, as we said earlier. Or there might be some resentment about what's happened in an important relationship, or there might be financial fears or stresses of various kinds, trying to work and teach the kids at the same time, and very difficult, challenging stuff. Can you watch that as the peaceful awareness? With a sense that this peaceful awareness is this universal field of consciousness. With one of innumerable focal points right here in this personality. Watching everything unfold with great equanimity and peace and loving kindness. Therefore, do you see that we don't have to control our experience? We don't have to repress anything. We don't have to pretend. We don't have to resist. We can be present with it all, wholly unconcerned, yet intimately engaged in our daily unfolding experience, wholly unconcerned, because we are the peaceful awareness, even as we are engaged in the unfolding of the external drama. All right, now watch the body take 3 nice full breaths. Be the peaceful awareness. Watching the process of taking 3 full deep breaths. Be the peaceful awareness, observing the way the body is being supported by the couch or the chair. And notice that whatever the experience of the body is, the witness of it is always in perfect peace. And then as you begin to open your eyes, be the peaceful awareness that looks around the room. And you can either feel or cultivate the sense that the peaceful awareness always wears an inner smile. No matter what's going on in the outer room, in the outer world, the soul, the inner self, the inner life always wears a loving, compassionate smile toward everything that it sees in the outer life. There's always a warmth. And as we learn to direct that warmth and that loving awareness to everything that arises in the experience of the personality self, those things get healed. Karmas arise and are processed and released. Some take longer than others, to be sure. But getting to a certain place where, karmas are less and are, all of that doesn't matter so much, because long before the karmas are processed through, we are learning to identify more and more as loving, peaceful awareness, bringing great kindness and love and patience, and also wisdom and insight, inspiration to the struggle of the outer life. All right. Let your body move a little bit. I'd like to give you the opportunity to ask any questions that you may have. Make any comments about your experience. My hope is to offer you something tonight that you can, with practice, begin to utilize in these very challenging times. If you have a question or a comment, just unmute yourself and chime in.
Hi, Scott.
Hi, Connie.
Last week I had the amazing experience in the class of actually being able to let go and to fly in the meditation. And it was so wonderful tonight that it was so much, it was just so natural. It was like, once you know it's going to be okay, it was just that wall that has been there for so long was just gone. It was just effortless to get right in there and just be there. And all these years, it's great to finally be on the other side of that. So,
Beautiful.
thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that, Connie. So I should say, it can be frustrating when we begin to access this, that we can't just always live in it. Right? It's like, well, if I've tasted this now and I've broken through and now I see that the wall isn't there, and now that I see it's not scary, why can't I just live in this? And this is something, for those of you that are beginning to have that experience, this is something for you. That's the kind of the next thing to be very, very curious about. What is it that pulls me back into my default consciousness as a separate personality self? when I begun to discover the freedom, um, and these glimpses of this profound awakening, the freedom of the inner life, the qualities of love, joy, and bliss, um, why can't I just stay there? Because there are karmas. There's unfinished business that pulls us back into in my case, the Scott life, and and invites me. I use that word invite with a smile. It invites me to look at all these things that are unresolved and unfinished in my life, things that are still aligned more with fear than with love, things that are aligned more with untruth and illusion than with truth. And I'll even find parts of myself, I've been watching this for a lot of years, parts of myself that want to use going back out into this great field of peace as an escape from, or a distraction from, all these unresolved aspects of my life, these frustrations with money, or these relational struggles and reactions, or my continued reaction to the current president, and all the kind of all of that brings me back, right? This is unfinished business. It brings us back even lifetime after lifetime. So then this becomes a really beautiful thing. Once you begin to experience this kind of falling back into the inner life, so to speak, then you begin to watch with great curiosity what pulls you out of that back into the life of the Scott self or the Connie self, right? Because that then becomes where we begin to focus more and more of that loving awareness to actually process out, work through, heal, release, and clear these what are sometimes very pervasive and tenacious karmic patterns.
Isn't it okay to come back out?
Totally.
Yeah, I mean,
Totally. It's totally okay.
yeah,
Ultimately, where we're headed is a sloughing away of everything that would pull us back into personhood, and we return to our true nature, which is universal consciousness. That's where the evolution takes us. So it's great what you're saying. It shows that you are understanding this isn't a problem. It's totally okay to come back.
yeah.
And you're absolutely right. Because there's nothing bad or wrong about the personality self. It just is not our true nature.
Well, it's especially nice with what you're, the last couple of meditations where we're bringing that true nature into the personality self. So
That's it.
So it's totally okay to be here, hopefully to be here at a little higher level. So.
And that's the deal. It's so beautifully said, Connie. We're not wanting to escape out of the personality self as though it's bad. There are some traditions down through time that have created this duality between spirit and matter, and the goal is to get out of matter and out into spirit. It's not at all what's happening here. What's happening here is we appreciate the personality self as being the vehicle of our soul's evolution, of the evolution of our consciousness. Our consciousness grows through the experience that is had in the body mind as we operate in the world. So it's just an incredible blessing, these personality selves. And unless they are aligned with higher consciousness and begin to be the instrument of higher consciousness, they can be the source of our suffering.
Hey, Scott.
Yes, please.
Wanted to share that the last week or so, I've been listening to a lot of podcasts on near-death experiences and hearing people share stories of what happens after we let go of our physical body and have this incredible experience with light and love and joy. And it was just like this real confirmation that that's where we go to. That's that being that's always there, available to us. And so it just really affirmed in my meditations what's always available is that place of peace and love, and knowing that everything's occurring perfectly as it needs to occur. And so
Yes.
just falling into that trust. So it was very interesting hearing the same story shared over and over by people. And
Yes.
it was nice hearing that confirmation.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that, Lisa. That is so true. And that is why, because we can find that consciousness without dying, it's why, as we do this more and more, the fear of death falls away.
Mhm.
Because we know what our nature is, that we return to when the body drops away. And so it's beautiful to have those confirmations. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Hi, Scott. This is Lynn.
Hi, Lynn.
Yeah. And you mentioned something that just kind of snagged my mind, which was the separation of soul and personality, and that it's been my experience that my soul has never left me, no matter how much I've been bounced out of my body, and that it's actually, it's that unseen part of me that actually kept me here on the planet during just weird times. And so I don't see that ever happens, that there is an
what is it that
actual
I said?
What is it that she said? Okay, wait. It was something, and my mind went off spinning on it, which was and it had to do with the separation of the soul and the physical body or personality. And then I just went like, well, wait, that doesn't ever happen.
No, that doesn't ever happen.
Okay.
So I'm not sure how I gave you that impression, or just simply misspoke.
Right,
No,
I heard that.
there's no separation. When the soul leaves the body is a corpse.
Yeah.
Right. And also we want to make sure we understand that this whole thing from spirit to creation is a continuity of a single consciousness. Mind thinks in terms of duality, so mind thinks in terms of separation, and the soul is separate from the body. In this lifetime is an expression of the soul. It's an extension into the physical dimension of the soul. Right. So there isn't ever a separation between the personality self and the soul, nor the soul and divine spirit.
Okay.
It's all a continuity of a single consciousness.
Thank you for clarifying that. But that brings up another thing, awareness. So
Yes.
awareness is a quality of the soul, but it's also a quality of the mind too, isn't it?
I would say that awareness is a function, or we can even call it a definition of the soul that operates in and through the mind.
Okay.
Awareness is always the primary thing. Mind will piggyback on and add its own interpretations and stories and ideas, right? But the first thing that happens is there is an awareness, and then the mind immediately jumps in. And it happens so quickly that most people aren't able to discern between awareness and thought. But that's a profoundly important thing to distinguish between. So that, a lot of people I have clients who express a great deal of anxiety when we do practices that bring about quiet in the mind that creates anxiety for them, right? They're so used to identifying themselves as they're thinking that when the thinking is quiet and still and quiescent, there's this feeling of, I'm about to disappear. But awareness is always there, underlying all of that. And in meditation, we get to the awareness that has no object. It is just abiding in and as this brilliant consciousness, this brilliant awareness.
So you just said that awareness is the soul,
Yes.
Okay.
Awareness is a way of, is one way of talking about the soul, but it is the nature of the soul. It is consciousness.
Okay. Okay. But it's not all encompassing, is it? I mean, wouldn't you say there's other qualities of the soul?
Of course.
Okay. Okay.
Of course.
Okay.
Of course. Again, this is why I prefaced it at the beginning with, it always is going to be a mystery. We're gonna use language, but as soon as we use thoughts and words, we begin to parse things out and separate
Yeah.
things. That's just the nature of using language. And language creates three-dimensional pictures in our mind, and soul is beyond all of that.
Yeah.
So, but it's still helpful to have our conversations if they allow us to go deeper or higher into meditation.
Yeah.
The language, the talking about it, the discussions as we're doing can still help to release the constrictions of our conditioning and open us to deeper experience, which in the end, that's what's transformative, is the actual contact with the experience of. Thank you, Lynn. Appreciate it.
Hi, Scott. It's Steve.
Hey, Steve.
I'm in Napa. Left Paradise in November of 2018.
Ah, yes.
I have a question about grace, if you're up for that.
Sure, sure.
So it's a word that I've been thinking about a lot lately, and my previous understanding based on my religious experiences has always been that grace is something that comes from outside down to me as sort of a undeserving recipient. And I'm thinking lately that grace is something more like a divine presence that is within, and it, as I grow, it sort of manifests itself more fully. And I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts on that.
Sure, I do, because grace has been a focus in my life for all of my adult life. And I just need to say, as I do every now and again, all of this is just my current understanding of any of these topics. It's not absolute truth, So I like how you've shifted from the idea that it's coming from outside of me somewhere down to me, this unworthy kind of person. That is the that's our conditioning, especially in religion. Amazing grace that saved a wretch like me,
Right.
And I understand, because the guy who wrote that was a slave trader, and as he came to understand what he was doing, he felt terrible about himself being a slave trader. I really understand that. But the truth about you and me and everybody on the call and everybody in the world is we are an expression and extension of divine consciousness, not ever separate from it.
Yeah.
So what we get from higher consciousness is exactly what we need on our journey back to remembering and realizing our true nature. And that's what grace is. Grace is exactly what we need to help us move farther into the realization of who and what we actually are. It's the response. So in the body, I use this metaphor. In the body, if I cut my finger, say I'm slicing an apple in the morning and I cut my finger, there is an immediate response in the body that begins the healing process immediately. Blood begins to coagulate, and all kinds of things begin to happen. And 2 weeks later, there may be a mark or whatever, but it's pretty much gone. So the whole body, the wisdom of the body mind responds to that cut and puts into motion exactly the processes needed to bring about the healing and the restoration of that finger. You follow me?
Yeah.
You and I are a part of a larger universal divine being. And when we're hurting and when we're lost, there is a response that immediately goes into work, into process to restore, to heal, and to awaken. And that response is what I call grace. It's everything necessary from the consciousness that remembers what it is to help the consciousness that's forgotten what it is. So I don't know if that clears things up or makes them more muddy for you. But the point I'm trying to make is grace is the divine response to everything we need to find our way back home.